when you're in it, you really feel like your body's broken, basically. Now we know, even further to that, that IBS is actually a disorder of the gut-brain interaction. And don't lose hope. Don't, because you're not broken. You just need someone to help you function better. The most evidence-based strategy is dietary expansion.
Hi, my name is Thrishi. Thank you so much for your precious time in watching this amazing conversation. I wanted to tell you real quick why I started this thing called the BioBelly Show. My best friend Ankit was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis around the peak of the pandemic. And I felt he did not know how it is to find root cause healing and how to find a long-term solution for his issues. Once I figured that out and I saw an intelligent person like him going through a vicious cycle of crippling symptoms that are changing his overall lifestyle and his relationship with food and his relationship with movement, I realized that the most important thing I can do is become a bridge to serve people with information on how it is we can bring root cause healing to the world, right? And look, with gut issues, it's so weird because the gut is the central part of our whole body, right? And so disease always starts with a small dysfunction with the gut, as far as I am learning, right? So my goal for this podcast is to speak with every single gut healer that I can, right? Whether that's a naturopath, whether that's a gastroenterologist, whether that's an IBS dietitian, whether that's a CBT expert, whether that's an EDMR specialist, whether that's a gut hypnotherapist. Basically, I want to speak with everyone who heals guts because I want to make it very accessible how it is our body works, how it is we can get long-term relief, and how it is we should optimally live for an optimized gut, thereby having an optimized health. And I really hope you enjoy this conversation. If it serves you, please like and subscribe because it does support us and show us that our dream is coming true and we're actually healing guts for a living. So without further ado, let's hop into the episode. Today, we're joined by Bonnie Wisener, founder of Shift Nutrition and Wellness and the creator of Shift Your Gut. Bonnie helps women who struggle with bloating, constipation, and gas find true relief by looking at food and everything beyond food, like stress, routines, and daily habits. She's a gut health educator with a calm, practical style, and she's helped thousands move from always uncomfortable to confident and consistent. We'll dig into simple, evidence-informed strategies you can use right away. So grab a tea and let's welcome Bonnie to the podcast. Bonnie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Trishi. I really enjoyed chatting with you before we even got on here. It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bonnie, I would love to learn a little bit more about your story. I know before our podcast, you poured your heart and you shared so much about your own health gut struggles and how you turned that into a beautiful passion to serving others. Can you please shed light on your story and what got you to become a healer?
For sure. Thank you. I actually enjoy talking about this because I hope that somebody, anybody, anywhere hears this and knows that. Because when you're in it, when you're really struggling, like you and I discussed about a friend of yours and about some family members and myself, when you're in it, it really feels, and most of my clients will say this to me when I meet them for the first time, like, I don't think there's anything that's going to help, basically, right? You feel like this is just the way your body works. If it goes on long enough, you really feel like your body's broken, basically. And in my case, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is an inflammatory bowel disease, when I was in my kind of early 20s. And, I went through all the conventional roads. And unfortunately, as a 20-something-year-old, the fact is, back then, this was many years ago already, we didn't even have biologic drugs. Like we only had steroid drugs and like really harsh acting drugs. And I was always averse to that anyways. I always had a more holistic approach to wellness and instinctively. And so I would get myself in a jam where I would be in the most immense pain, undernourished, because my only, as I started to say to you before we started recording, you know, when you have issues with your gut, it's understandable that we all turn to not eating or eating very little. And so, as a busy person just starting a career at the time, I ended up in the hospital, unfortunately, on more than one occasion. And the frustrating part of that, I'll be very brief with this, but was that in a conventional environment where you thought you had the best and the brightest available to you, everyone from the gastroenterologist to the registered dietitians, nobody could actually tell me how to guide my diet properly at all, right? The same hospital food that arrives on trays for everybody else arrived on a tray for me, which of course, actually I was on an IV to be fair, but once I started eating, it was crap and it didn't make sense, right? So the only thing that I had heard because of the inflammation involved in those conditions is don't eat popcorn, don't eat nuts, because it's going to get stuck in the folds of inflammation. So I didn't for 25 years or a long time. And anyhow, suffice it to say that that was an extraordinarily frustrating experience that people still go through today, unfortunately, in those same offices. And in my case, I'll make the story very short how I got here, because this is a second career for me. But I went back to school. I was always interested in nutrition. I studied holistic nutrition. And from there, I really ultra specialized and became immersed in all of the information and research that was available to me when it came to functional digestive issues. For example, most of my client base has irritable bowel syndrome, and rates of irritable bowel syndrome across North America are close to 15%. That actually exceeds cardiovascular disease, just to put it in perspective. And again, we're kind of not helped any better than I was that many years ago. In fact, I would say that IBS is even a little more murky in those conventional environments. So that's really what led to my interest and my passion around trying to help people who fall into this category, who are struggling.
Wow. I have heard time and time again, IBS, Bonnie, sometimes it's like a catch-all term that gastroenterologists might just throw, or not just any, but any healer, when they might not understand exactly what's the root cause or what's going on in a person's gut that's manifesting as these issues, they just call it IBS. What exactly is IBS, and what is the best course of action to, one, understanding the root cause, and two, trying to find the way to heal from it?
Okay, that's a fantastic question. It really is. And 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, let's say, my answer might have sounded a little different. So for many, many years, depending on how old you are, whoever's listening to this, you might have been told a lot of different things in your doctor's office, right? Most of the time, unfortunately, people were kind of poo-pooed away. Like it's in your head, maybe just like, don't stress about it, butterflies in your stomach. Like really, it wasn't taken seriously enough. What it is, I mean, we now know for sure what it is. It's definitely not a disease. It's a disorder. It's a dysfunction. So literally if you think of your body as a machine, we have a body part that is not functioning well. It's broken or it's missing a piece, or whatever analogy you want to use for that. But now we know, even further to that IBS is actually a disorder of the gut-brain interaction. So we now know that if you want to look for a root cause, which we always do want to sort of try and figure out why it's happening so that we can try and address the problem. Seems logical. One of the most fundamental things is a dysregulated nervous system. So we now know things like, just practically speaking, for example, what that looks like is we now understand that people who have irritable bowel syndrome, without getting into all of the symptoms and all of the nuances involved, we now understand that somebody with irritable bowel syndrome literally feels the motility movement. So as stuff moves through your intestines, somebody without IBS isn't going to even feel that. It's not going to be sensational to them at all. Because of this heightened gut-brain component, somebody with irritable bowel syndrome actually feels that perhaps painfully or with a lot of discomfort. That's just one example, but that is how it manifests, among other things. So it is really, again, the example enjoy describing for my clients is looking at it as if, first of all, digestion is a cascade, functional digestion. Things have to happen in a particular order in order for food to break down comfortably, in order for our body to optimally access nutrition from a very basic perspective, right? But it's also, think of it like an assembly line in a factory, right? So let's say I'm simplifying this beyond, but let's say there's like 4 guys on an assembly line mirroring the necessary functions of digestion, right? There's 4 pieces of digestion. There's more, but to simplify it. So let's say one day, guy number 1 comes to work. He's in a massive hurry because it's his anniversary. He has to get out of there quickly. He hasn't bought his wife a gift, whatever the case may be, right? He's rushing through his job that day. So it's ineffective, not as effective. The problem is guy number 3 came to work with a broken arm. So he's not actually doing his job as effectively either. So that's a cascade of problem, because if guy number 3 came to work like that, but guy number 1 was on the ball and doing his job, maybe even doubling down on how he normally does his job, taking his time, etc., maybe it wouldn't affect guy number 3 as substantially. And the whole process, the doohickey at the end, whatever they're producing, would be just fine. But because guy number 3 is impaired, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about dysfunction, you almost don't even really need to completely understand what the root is. Sometimes you just won't, right? Because guy number 3 is in that state, all of the steps in this cascade of digestion really need to be reinforced. It's almost like having a crutch. If you're walking with a broken leg, you're not going to continue putting pressure on a broken leg, which is like guy number 3 in this, right? You need to really support it. So some of the functional aspects of support look like meal spacing. It looks like chewing your food really well. It looks like making sure your nervous system is in like a decent state. You're not agitated while you're eating, which practically speaking could be like literally not eating in front of the computer. There's a lot of things that we incorporate to just circumvent the idea that there's something in that assembly line that isn't working well. So to begin with, you need to take pressure off that broken leg or that.
Wow. I love that assembly line analogy. That really makes it clear. It's
Oh, good.
Yeah. So once you do find that cause, or you figure out what it is that might be driving that issue, what is that course of action we take, Bonnie, to start repairing the gut?
Okay. So it can obviously look different for different people. And it usually will look different for different people. My approach, so I have an approach that I developed. It has a name. It's called the Shift Your Gut Therapy Method. And it focuses almost exclusively on diet and lifestyle. So in other words, for the time being, it doesn't necessitate like things like supplements or other kinds of testing, like hair mineral analysis or microbiome testing. Those are amazing. I'm just trying to demonstrate for you that it isn't always necessary in order to improve function. Okay. It gives you information. Those are information tools. So when I start working with a client, obviously, like everybody else, I'll do a fairly comprehensive intake. So you need to understand the context of that person's concern or condition. IBS doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? You need to understand what other health related things are going on, what that person's diet looks like, what their current lifestyle looks like, what their stress patterns look like. You take in all of that information so that you can customize a solution for somebody. After that, I'm not going to say it's trial and error, but it is a little bit of trial and error, right? There are things like we focus on that try and enhance function. So for example, I'll start with the longest term strategy, in my opinion. The longest term strategy, in my opinion, is dietary expansion. So we know if there's anything going on with the microbiome in terms of imbalance in like dysbiosis and that kind of thing, that you don't even have to have that information specifically to address it. It's helpful if you do, but you don't have to. So what you do, the most evidence-based strategy is dietary expansion. We know that when people have 30 plant varieties or more a week in their diet, there is an impact on diversity of your microbiota. That's a very positive thing when it comes to digestive function. So that's a longer term strategy. On the food front, a shorter term strategy might look like, first of all, unfortunately, sometimes removing. So there does have to very often be, not always, but often be some sort of short term elimination, right? So for example, I mentioned to you that I don't customarily approach things through a low FODMAP approach, but certainly you need, if somebody's demonstrating certain symptoms, you might want to lay off or lower the amount of FODMAPs in their diet. The problem is that, to me, would have to be short term, because long term, it doesn't address what the objective is, right? So there's that. Short term, or even as an established protocol, you might want to start helping your clients understand that dietary fiber on its own is something that over a course of time, we want to try and become adapt to, because it's really, really important, because that's where the 30 plants a week thing comes from, right? Prebiotic and fiber-rich foods actually feed the gut bacteria properly. So I say that only because most people in North America do not come close to even minimal fiber requirements, right? And people with digestive issues, I would have fallen into this category many years ago as well. Those are the foods that we often find the most problematic and feel like cause symptoms. So it's a tricky thing. You have to really handhold somebody. What I like to do in my practice is have my clients make a list of all the foods that they know or feel intuitively that they're comfortable with, because I feel like even among those foods, even if there's sometimes people only have 5 foods in their diet right? But let's say they have 10 that they know they like, or that they know that they could tolerate. But really what we do, most of us by nature, is we turn to the same foods over and over again, even without issues. So this is the first expansion that's comfortable for people, that's not intimidating, is you ask them to just start expanding among the foods they're already comfortable with. There's usually at least another 5 at play, right? And hopefully more. So that's one aspect of this. Following that, or in conjunction with that, there are strategies that we use. You need to speak to people and find out, like, is your job or your career demanding that you're skipping meals? Are you skipping meals because you're trying to lose weight? Are you skipping meals because you're actually uncomfortable and you feel like eating less often is better? But it's not. In my opinion, it's really not, because what you're doing is eventually we all have to eat enough, right? And so when it's all condensed in a shorter amount of time, you're actually putting a lot of pressure on an already suffering digestive system from a function perspective. So it's better to have well-timed meals. The other reason for that is there's literally, I'm sure you know this, there's a function called migrating motor complex that is only activated after periods of brief fasting periods, right? It gets triggered. So that's really important to motility as well. It's not shocking, but understandable, but very common for people who are struggling to not do that, to actually have less meals or to eat more condensed framework. Some people are even told to do intermittent fasting for IBS still in conventional environments. So there's that. That's a big piece of it. Going back to the nervous system regulation piece, there's a number of things there. Something as simple as just, our nervous system literally in the moment gets its signal from our breathwork pattern. So you might not even realize that just driving to work in traffic is agitating your system and putting you into stress mode versus rest and digest mode. We need to be in rest and digest mode optimally in order for function to be sort of the most appropriate, the most optimal. And so even just taking a few deep breaths before you sit down and eat every meal, I have a sticker on my computer, which is pretty funny. it says breathwork, 3 minutes. Like I have to remind myself, because you probably already know, I barely stop talking. But it's really, really impactful. Like that is exactly how our nervous system understands where it's supposed to do, where it's supposed to be, and what it's supposed to do. So that's a simple thing to address nervous system regulation. Another piece of that is, remember I said in that um, assembly line example that the first guy and like the third guy might be like almost like somebody with a broken leg on crutches. So if you have a broken leg, if you have a broken or disrepaired or a dysfunctional digestive piece of digestive function, then what you want to do is you want to chew your food really well. You want to eat slowly so that all of the resources could be actioned. All of the signals like secretion of stomach acid, secretion of enzymes, like all of these things can happen in good time and not get missed, basically. So that's like a crutch, right? And then there are other things for nervous system regulation that are a little more sophisticated and a little more involved. I myself, I am not a gut-directed hypnotherapist, but if you're familiar with gut-directed hypnotherapy, that's also something that I incorporate into my practice via Nerva, which is an online app that's accessible to everybody. So I see Nerva as an excellent tool and layer for almost everybody who has IBS. But again, as a Nerva skilled practitioner, you're taught how to screen your clients to see if they could benefit from it, because it's quite a commitment. It's 6 weeks at minimum. So you want to make sure you're not just asking anybody or, encouraging people who might have difficulty adhering to it to do it, because then they just feel like they're failing something. So you want to help in that way. So that's another tool. And then there's education and coaching around, like people need information, right? So we know that for people with irritable bowel syndrome, doing high intensity interval training might not be the best exercise for you. Again, because of that nervous system component, one of the reasons. So you want to try and help people find the most ideal movement for them, but also help encourage people to understand how important movement is, even non-exercise movement, like going for a walk for 5 minutes after every meal could be huge for somebody who's dealing with slow motility or bloating or gas or whatever, right? Because you're moving things around. It's simple, right? There's like a series of digestive health stretching exercises that you could provide to somebody so that they know when they should do it. And I mean, there's so many strategies. So without going into all of them, there's like, morning toilet sitting, and there's a million different things, really. Well, not a million, but there's a lot. And the thing for people to understand is you don't have to take it all on. When you work with a practitioner who's expert at this, they help you identify which ones could be most relevant to your set of circumstances, first of all. And then when I said it's trial and error, I mean, sometimes you do try things with people, but through oversight and observation from the client and back from myself, eventually you start to learn which of these pieces seems to have had the most impact. What's moving the needle? People are starting, I've had women who, maybe go to the bathroom once every 8 days. All of a sudden they start having regular bowel movements. They come closer together. Then they're having a daily bowel movement. That's fantastic. And I know that is the reason most people seek out help, because they want to get to that point. But if you stop there, it's actually not good enough. The best part is then knowing through observation and partnership and back and forth what got you there. Because at the end of it all, through, again, this shift your gut therapy method that I use, and probably, all other practitioners have other systems, but ultimately you need to get to a place where you understand specifically which tools to keep in your toolkit for you that have been helpful. You can take them on vacation with you, and this is what happens. People will resolve their issues in 3 months, really, but then they'll go on a holiday. And we all know what plane travel and, time zone changes could do to anybody's system. But then they have this toolkit that they take out, and within a few days, they're good and they can enjoy their vacation. Whereas, over the last 10 years, they weren't able to do that. So I hope I'm giving you a bit of a flavor of what it takes. The important thing I think for people to hear is that it is great to be informed and to get information wherever you can find credible information, but not all tools work for everybody, right? So I think there's a lot of spinning that goes on and a lot of disappointment that happens because sometimes we're employing things for too long that don't have effect. So we feel unsuccessful, and that doesn't help. It makes us feel forlorn, right? Whereas if you can distinguish between something that's really helpful and something that might help someone else but isn't doing anything for you, you save yourself time, and it helps with our sense of integrity and our sense of hope, you know? And the other thing is when you do things, some of the things that people have to change is hard. And sometimes things we have to do seem difficult at first, right? And I think that when we're doing it on our own, we also are very happy to sort of come to a conclusion that XYZ didn't work for us because it's confirmation bias. It's like, I don't want to do it anyway. So we leave it. We think it didn't work, but we're not observing it necessarily in the way that we should. So anyway, there's a lot of those types of things that, you can really help people get clarity on. And the accountability piece when you work with somebody who knows this area very well can be helpful as well.
Wow, that was so powerful. I mean, even like in terms of the nitty gritty and the big picture, I feel like you really widened my perspective, right? Because it's so interesting to understand it like this. Really what a healer is supposed to do is understand your niche, your specific situation, and given the tool, all the different tools that historically have been successful needle movers towards healing, we're trying to see which ones are best for you. And we're trying to empower the person with the gut issues to imbibe them in their lifestyle and have them in their toolkit, whether they're on vacation or just daily life. And to your last point, the most important piece is having it so that they enjoy it. So they're able to be accountable, so they're able to be consistent in those actions.
Yeah, it's the most incredible thing because even my process is 12 weeks usually. Sometimes it's longer, but typically it's about 12 weeks, right? So it's consecutive 12 weeks in a group format, yada, yada. I mean, I work with people privately as well, but I can't tell you how many times it's fascinating. And I have to remind them, these women will come to like week 7 or 8 or 6 or whatever, and things are really dramatically changing, right? And out of their mouth comes, yeah, so like, I don't know why this is happening, but, and I'll be like, wait a second, I can tell you why it's happening. We just had 6 weeks of conversations. Don't forget, you're the one doing this. I'm not doing this, right? You're the one doing this. But it's almost unbelievable, even to themselves. When things change for us like that, all of us, it is almost unbelievable. I can't tell you how long I waited. Now, even to this day, like I literally have been symptom-free of Crohn's, not because of my work, just by fortune and by employing, doing things that I feel have been good for me in my situation. I have been symptom-free for pretty much 30 years now, almost. And yet I even still am waiting for the other shoe to drop. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a part of me that is always still like a little worried, So I have a confidence about it, but it's not an arrogance about it because sometimes, and nobody is, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, I guess we don't know this for sure yet, but part of me believes that if you have IBS because of this, one of the more evidence-based routes now for sure is this gut-brain interaction piece. And even through things like gut-directed hypnotherapy, which is really cognitive behavior therapy for your gut, you can change that interaction. But how much support consistently does it need moving forward, right? So my point is that acquiring information is amazing, but actually experiencing transition and observing what it is that's helping you specifically is, I think, the most powerful in the realm of this.
And Bonnie, the most inspiring thing is, speaking of transitions, your ability to have such a crippling problem like Crohn's and recovering from it, and now being in a state where you have a healthy confidence that you can, do what you love with freedom. It's so inspiring. The question that always keeps me up at night is that I know that the gut changes every day, right? Our gut is an ever-evolving, beautiful ecosystem. But when people are stricken with issues like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, they are very strongly conveyed at times that this is something that they have to live with their whole life.
It's true. Yeah.
Like
Ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and IBS are very different in that way. I do work with clients who have inflammatory bowel disease as well. That was probably the first thing I chose to do. And I still do have clients on my roster privately that I work with in that realm. And it is different. And it's even in that area of study, it's changing. Like the way that it's treated is different than it used to be. But the impact, so with clients who have that, there are other concerns for sure. But the immune system is still really, really important to that conversation, right? So you might spend a little more time working on aspects that support immunity, strengthen immunity. But all of the things that I just discussed, again, the Crohn's in that scenario, I don't want to simplify it because it's much more complicated than what I'm about to say. But in a way, if you look at the functional aspect of digestion, the Crohn's becomes the broken leg, and everything else kind of can not cure it or solve it, but help it, more optimize it. Even diet. You know, with people with Crohn's and colitis, very often the most optimal diet that we know in general is the Mediterranean diet, right? But it involves a lot of foods that people who have difficulty with inflammation have difficulty digesting. So again, you have to break it off in little pieces for people and try and, all you can do is enhance that person's situation. You know, it doesn't mean everybody has to strive for, you know, the ideal. You just have to improve.
Because I think when I was starting to learn a little bit about Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, in my head, I was like, all right, it's inflammation. It's inflammation. And what I love about your take on it is that you are trying to support, strengthen the immune system, where I feel like in conventional medicine, the medications are more on the immunosuppressant side. So they're kind of the opposite.
Yeah. Actually, though, interesting. I just learned that this week because my longtime gastroenterologist retired. He was amazing. He was super conventional, but we knew each other a long time, and he was amazing. I was very lucky. But even though I don't have symptoms, I had to be under someone's umbrella for like regular colonoscopies and things. So I was very fortunate in where I live to be referred to and accepted into a practice for someone who I think is one of the best in the city. And why do I think he's one of the best in the city? Because he's so open-minded. He's so current and up-to-date on the functional and the conventional and everything else. And I learned from him that, first of all, inflammatory bowel disease is no longer considered an autoimmune condition, which it was for many years. And even though they use the same classes of drugs, they're immunomodulators. They're not necessarily, they're moving into that versus suppressants, which is really cool. I don't understand it completely, but I know there's a distinction.
That's interesting. Like if I think about it in a nitty gritty level, like there's like these small entities that are like inflammatory. They do inflammatory signaling, right? And it's like, of course, inflammation is something our body does to protect us. It's like when something is seeping through the leaky gut and they're like, okay, red alert, something is going into the bloodstream that shouldn't be going there. It kind of does make sense. I love that. I love that word, modulators.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, many years ago, there was some research done at Mass General in Boston in the pediatric celiac unit. And I can't remember the researcher's name right now, unfortunately. Anyway, but the research was basically, and again, it was for celiac disease, right? But it was foundational to a hormone called zonulin that actually is really, zonulin, right? So it's very involved in moderating the opening and closing of the tight junctions in your gut. And anyway, that piece is interesting because, again, when it comes to inflammatory bowel disease, could that be relevant too? Because that is the pathway, right? So that's where the whole conversation for IBD came in about foods that might be create an inflammatory response or an intolerant response, because stuff was getting into the bloodstream not perfectly broken down, and the immune system wasn't recognizing those molecules, right? So that's like a whole other discussion for sure. But again, all of the work that we could do to try and strengthen all of those pieces that affect, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it kind of intersects.
Super interesting stuff. Yeah, I feel one of the takeaways I had was the healers that are the most impactful are the ones that are open-minded, and they do have a beautiful way of mixing the functional with the conventional to ultimately, provide the most streamlined path towards long-term healing.
Yeah, I think it's really important too.
Absolutely. Bonnie, thank you so much for all your time. If you had one last message of hope to give to someone watching this conversation, trying to find an answer, what would that be?
Okay, that's a great question. I have two things to say. First of all, trust yourself, be intuitive about your body. It's not necessarily going to be an easy road, but I mean, sitting on this side of the desk, not using myself as an example, just thinking of clients that I've worked with, people have been constipated for 30 years, etc. With the right type of support, your whole life can change. I mean, if you're feeling like you can't leave your house now because of urgency, because of worrying about where the bathrooms are, those things can change. Like from 1 year to the next, from 1 month till 6 months from now, things could look very different. And don't lose hope. Don't, because you're not broken. You just need someone to help you function better.
Wow. Love it. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Bonnie, where can people find you to learn more about you and get more of your expertise?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. So first of all, I'm easily found on Instagram under my practice name, which is Shift Nutrition and Wellness. And I also have a website, which is my name, www.bonniewisener.com.
Love it. Bonnie, thank you so much for this conversation. Fingers crossed, hopefully soon down the line, we have another conversation. And so excited for everything you're doing and the lives you're changing. And I hope that hopefully I can also be a small, incremental, positive change maker. So thank you so much.
I'm excited about the work that you're helping to do now too. I really am. So I look forward to speaking again. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.